In a vote of no confidence, let me reassure everyone that it will take an army of tanks to remove us from this podcast. Folks, welcome to the MMA Sucka Podcast. My name is Tim Wheaton, joined as always by the editor-in-chief at MMA Sucka, Frazer Krohn. How are you doing today, sir?
Yeah, good. Thank you, mate. I've had a fairly quiet week on the website in comparison to yourself. Obviously, you've been conducting a lot of interviews this week with glory fighters. So, congrats on them. They were brilliant, especially I really like Tiffany Timebomb's interview. I thought that, I haven't really heard her talk a lot to the media. So I thought that was a really good interview.
Yeah, Tiffany was awesome to speak with. Glory PR has been extremely good to us. Like they're really good people. So I want to thank Glory PR for all the interviews. We got a couple more coming this week and a few more coming in the future. But yeah, Glory's been good stuff. But yeah, Arcadius Verdrosic is supposed to be a hard interview. We did great. Tiffany, not a lot of interviews on her. We did awesome. So yeah, that was a good weekend for us. But we also had Chris Eubank Jr. beating up Liam Williams in a pretty one-sided fight. 4 knockdowns along the way to victory, and it wasn't very competitive. Even saying 4 knockdowns, it was more dominant than that. It wasn't that close.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the card itself, we had the debut of Caroline Dubois, obviously the younger sister of Daniel Dubois, Olympian. Really should have done better at the Olympics, but was on a sort of rough end of it and lost a split decision. We had Claressa Shields bore our way to a 20-minute victory. To be honest, at the end of the day, she's fighting a girl who's, I think she was 23 or 24 in Kozin. She should have been getting her out of there. And then she sort of squared off with Savannah Marshall.
That was the best moment of the fight.
For sure, and Savannah Marshall was speaking facts. She's saying, look, people were leaving after round 5. People were there to see Liam Williams in Wales, yes. Liam Williams from Wales, and, they were there to see Williams. Claressa Shields was a bonus. I don't think she grabbed the opportunity with both hands to really get on board with it. All week speaking a big game, always talks a big game, came out to the champions here, didn't really put on a championship performance, in my opinion. The 2 minutes round certainly hindered her, but she definitely should have been getting someone with someone like Kozin out of there. And, call me controversial, I think Savannah Marshall stops her. She's a much more precise... controversial. Exactly, but she's a much more precise striker. When we saw Claressa Shields get Kozin up against she was hurt multiple times in that fight, and Claressa Shields sort of backed her up to the ropes and unloaded on her. But they weren't calculated shots; they were shots whether she wanted the referee to jump in and step it due to the volume of shots rather than the hard-hitting nature of these shots. Savannah Marshall isn't like that, where Claressa Shields throws 10, Savannah Marshall also 4, all of them will land directly on the chin, pinpoint. So I think, if Marshall can get through her next fight in March, that's the fight to make in June, July time. And I think, that's without a doubt, it's a headliner.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, Claressa's done a good job. We were talking about fighter pay. I think Claressa's done a good job to take 2 fights a year, be the biggest name in women's boxing. And I think like people who are fans of hers, I like Claressa. She's a very technical boxer and I like her personality, and a lot of people don't like her personality. I like her, but I do question people who claim to be her fans because it makes me wonder, like, you seen her fight? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think you definitely buy into the Claressa Shields story coming from nothing to everything, as it were. And, if she got more finishes, she'd be such a bigger star. And I think, it's not exactly her fault. It's boxing's fault to only give the women 2-minute rounds. But moving on to the Liam Williams, Chris Eubank Jr. fight, I thought it'd be a lot closer fight than it was. And the 4 knockdowns don't really speak volumes, because in the first 3 to 4 rounds, after he knocked him down quite at the end of the first round, again in the second round, it was that quick check left hook. Very, obviously Eubank Jr.'s training with Roy Jones Jr. It's very Roy Jones-esque, he's hands low, quick jet left hook, and it was the speed that was getting to Williams. But as the fight wore on, Williams was getting the better of it, But when you start the 3rd round and you're already 20-16 down on the scorecards, you've got to pull something out pretty good to get the victory. And I don't think obviously Williams did enough. The final knockdown, I didn't personally score it as a knockdown. I didn't think it was more of a slip kind of. Williams was off balance. But it is what it is. Luckily, it didn't change the scorecard. It wasn't a point either way. So there wasn't any controversy there. But Chris Eubank Jr. did that fight convince me that he's now championship material. All it did really is show me that he fades ever so slightly as the fight goes on. Which, if he's going to go up against a champion in the division, Charlo or I know Buba Andrade is moving up or moving down. I know he's moving divisions, but he struggles with those fights, in my opinion. But it is what it is. I think Chris Eubank Jr. is a championship level boxer. If he can, the last round against Williams, he barely threw a shot, and that was purely because he knew he was ahead. But you can't be doing that again. We've seen how many times we've seen fighters showboat and not live to tell the tale, as it were. So it is what it is. But I think I thought it was a really good fight, and the card as a whole was really good. It was Boxer's first show on Sky Sports, and we finally got British boxing back. Obviously, the British boxing border control banned boxing throughout the entirety of January due to COVID. It's the first event back, and now we're really ramping things up in the coming weeks. We've got Josh Taylor and Jack Catterall coming up. We had Keith Thurman over the pond this weekend picking up another big win. Leo Santa Cruz picking up another win. So it's all heating up quite nicely in the world of boxing. Bless you.
Thank you. No, yeah, it's actually a relief to see something this high profile in our time zone. It's not common that this happens. Usually we're staying up till like 4 a.m. to watch anything relatively good, but this was quite a good fight, a good high profile fight. I think a couple of things that you said were bang on. Chris Eubank proved that he's probably championship quality. I think more than anything, he probably proved that he can main event. He can be a draw. He can trash talk on the way in, and he can make a fight. Even if it's a pretty big fight, he made this fight feel pretty big. Also, Liam Williams, do Welshmen age at incredibly rapid? Because I thought he was some 40-year-old man of like on the underside of his career. He's my age. He's 29.
Yeah, for sure. It's just he's one of those faces that's been around the world of boxing forever. And like you say, I was shocked when it was saying that Eubank's the older man.
Yeah,
physically can't be, but And this weekend we've got Danny Jacobs versus John Ryder. Danny Jacobs is a man that just doesn't seem to age at all. Yes, he slowed down, but the fact that he's still sort of competing at the highest level, and he seems to have been competing at the highest level for the past 5 or 6 years, and yet he's still competing at this high level. He's still only 35, but he's taken on the slightly younger John Ryder, who's 33. He got that very controversial loss to Callum Smith a few fights ago, but he's bounced back well. And that's a big fight in the middleweight division.
Yeah, things are moving and happening. Boxing has been getting exciting for the last couple of years. Things have actually been building up really well. But let's move. Oh, did you catch any of the rugby this weekend? Well, who cares what sport we're covering on this show?
Seeing as you're from, you're living, you're adopted Scot, I would really rather not talk about it.
I don't know about that call. I still don't know about that call. I know I barely get rugby, but I still think that call was kind of malarkey. The bar was happy.
Yeah.
The Bubba was happy, but
exactly,
I'm still I don't know what that call was about. Like, you gave him 5 points? That's quite the punishment.
Yeah, it's
that guy has a compressed spine, and they gave him 5 points.
Yeah, controversial to say the least. And then you bring a guy on for a concussion substitution, and of course he goes and scores within the first couple of minutes of being on, and then goes straight back off, and it's just frustrating from a British point of view. But it is fair. What it is, I guess.
We'll leave it at that. I can co-sign. But speaking of Chris Eubank Jr., something that I was saying, he can make a main event feel like a big fight. He can trash talk on the way in. During the fight, things felt like you were watching a major fight. Someone who doesn't have that quality and should have that quality, Sean Strickland. This weekend, he earned a unanimous decision victory over a gatekeeper in Jack Hermansson. The UFC kind of set this up to be like, look, Sean Strickland is becoming a name. Let's give him a main event slot on ESPN, and then he can really put a stamp on things. And at this point, no one's clamoring him. Like, no one wants to see him fight for a title. As we were talking off air, of no one's excited to see him even crack into the top 5. He's sneaking past all the gatekeepers on the way up. And despite I think his Twitter is more interesting than his fighting. Not, I mean, am I wrong? Stop me when I'm wrong. What did you think of the fight? What's the future of the middleweights and Sean Strickland?
No, I think I completely co-sign with what you're saying. He's all talk and sort of no bite. He's very much like the John Fitch of the stand-up world. He could probably finish these guys, but he doesn't put his foot down on the gas. And over 5 rounds, people say, oh, maybe I've seen someone on Twitter say, oh, maybe he was looking to sort of conserve his gas tank. His gas tank's phenomenal. He didn't even use the full minute of any of the rounds. He was bouncing on his feet for the entire round. He wasn't even heavily breathing at the end of the fight. He has the gas tank to go for the full 25 minutes, and yet he seems like the kind of guy that fights within himself. And Jack Hermansson is a difficult guy to finish.
He is. He definitely is.
He's picked up losses, but losses. Thiago Santos, knocked out by Thiago Santos. I mean, come on, who's not getting knocked out by Thiago Santos at middleweight? Jared Cannonier, former heavyweight, knocked out. And then you got a decision loss to Marvin Vettori, and then obviously now the decision loss to Sean Strickland. Yep. But like you say, the state of the middleweight division at the moment, where does Strickland go from here? It's difficult because that win for me wasn't a title shot, number one contenders fight, because Jack Hermansson isn't, unfortunately for Sean Strickland, he's not that caliber of fighter. I know that rankings haven't been updated this morning yet, but Sean Strickland's at 7, Jack Hermansson's at 6. You just expect them just to switch around, And then you look at the top 5. We're going to preview Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker, but does Sean Strickland beat Marvin Vettori? No, I think Marvin's got a better wrestling game than Jack Hermansson, there were desperation shots that Jack Hermansson was throwing from the first round, really. Jared Cannonier is obviously taking on Derek Brunson this weekend, kind of serving as a backup for the main event. But does Sean Strickland beat any of them? No, the new and improved Derrick Lewis, I don't think he beats. And Jared Cannonier, I think someone that's coming down from heavyweight and someone that's coming up from welterweight, it's...
Yeah,
we could say that about Cannonier and Robert Whittaker, but there's levels to this game. And then Paulo Costa versus Sean Strickland doesn't interest me in the slightest, to be honest. It is what it is, that fight. Maybe that's the fight to make next, to see who can really cement themselves and become the next wave of contender. But looking further down the list, I don't think Sean Strickland takes a fight against Darren Till, because why would he? Till's a dangerous striker. But I think Till. That's a good fight for Till.
That's a good fight for Till,
because it's kept on in the stand-up round. Till struggles when people look to take him down.
Yeah, Sean
Strickland's not going to look to take him down. We know he can beat Uriah Hall. We know he can probably beat Calvin Gastelum, and then you Brad Tavares, your Imanovs, Andre Muniz, who's got a fight with Uriah Hall, Kevin Holland, and Chris Weidman that sort of make up the top 15 now. Sean Strickland's in a position where he doesn't take a fight with any of those guys, because each of those guys on their day could beat him, but they don't do anything for his ranking. So I think the next fight for Sean Strickland will likely be a main event against Darren Till or Paulo Costa, or the loser of Derek Brunson versus Jared Cannonier. He doesn't get, Marvin Vettori fight for him doesn't do anything for Vettori. This is, he's coming off the title loss and the win against Costa. It doesn't do anything for Marvin Vettori to fight Sean Strickland and most likely beat him. He just potentially picks up a freak loss and drops right out of the title contention. But like I told you last week, the highlight of the card this weekend was my boy Shavkat.
Oh, absolutely! He's all the talking points.
Spinning hook kick to ground and pound, but he tried it once and it sort of caught the shoulder of Harris, and then he tried it again and it caught the side of the head of Harris, knocked him down, finished with ground and pound, 15 wins, 15 finishes. The hype is real. The hype is real.
Yeah, he's one of those. I'm getting on the hype train early. He's beaten quality opposition by dominant finish as well. I like him. I like his story. I like everything about Shavkat. He seems like a cool guy. And he doesn't seem arrogant about how good of a fighter he is, but slick takedowns, like this is as flawless as you can get on something like this. Nomad is the future. He's 15-0. Like this guy is good. I'm excited for the future of this gentleman. I don't know who you pair him up with next, because there is actually a lot of really good undefeated prospects at welterweight. Obviously, Nomad. Everyone talks about Hamzat all the time. Sean Brady's another like undefeated prospect.
Ian Gary, is it?
I'm thinking of Ian Gary.
Ian Gary's from Ireland, the 7-0, 1-0 in the UFC. Yeah,
there's a lot of good undefeated prospects coming up outside of the top 15. What do you think of the future?
Just at 170, And like you say, Shavkat, he called out, or he didn't call out, but he respectfully called out, should we say, Michel Pereira. I think that's a great next fight. It's a clear step up in competition.
He wins that.
He wins that. Does he win it by finish? So that's the interesting thing, because Michel Pereira, we've never seen him finish, but Shavkat, we haven't really seen him tested in his UFC career, and that's no fault of his own.
No.
Why, if you can cruise to victory in all of your fights, why wouldn't you? I want to see him on his back, because we don't know how, but a fight with Michel Pereira doesn't put him on his back. I would like to see him up against quite a tough wrestler next time out, but again, I think he's sort of the silent assassin of the division. If he spoke English, I think he'd be a much bigger name in the division, as bad as that sounds. But, it is what it is. It's, a Jeff Neal, maybe. He's coming off a decision victory against Ponzinibbio or a Ponzinibbio. These are two guys that are in and around the top 10, top 15. I think Shavkat beats them both. But, he's got to be given the opportunity now to push on and really, make an attempt at cracking the top 10, top 15, because, not enough people. 3-0 in the UFC with 3 finishes, 15-0 with 15 finishes, and it's not like he's fighting sort of like nobody fighters. His UFC debut was against Alex Oliveira. He used to fight in M1 Challenge. He's been a professional since 2014, and yet he's only recently signed for the UFC last year. 3-0 in the UFC with 3 finishes. I mean, like you say, I think Nomad's the future, and I'm not quite sure how. He's 27, so he's just entering his prime now. So it's an insane prospect that more people need to be talking about. I think they need to put him on a pay-per-view card next to get more eyes, maybe on the main card to get more eyes onto him, to get him, crossing over into that mainstream and getting, that's a highlight reel knockout. A hook kick to a ground and pound is a highlight reel knockout. But because it was on a fight card with not a lot of big, huge names that cross over, I haven't even seen the aside from actually watching the fight itself, I haven't even seen highlights on Twitter or anything for it. So, Shavkat needs that push now, and there's no reason why he won't get it.
That's absolutely true. He well deserves it at this point. It's an exciting, he's an exciting prospect for the future. But there wasn't a lot of highlights from the entire card. It was a pretty, is there anything else you want to throw out on this card? I don't know if there's much else.
I mean,
Sam Alvey lost. That's cool.
Sam Alvey doing Sam Alvey things, getting knocked out in an exchange. Hakeem Dawodu, your boy, getting the win.
Needed.
And we had that, that war between Julian Erosa and Steven Peterson. It's a shame that Peterson obviously missed weight because he wasn't entitled to that 50k fight of the night bonus, but you contracted to make weight, and if you can't make weight, you can't make weight, which is a shame for him because it was what a war. But it was just foot on the pedals from minute one, and he's fair play. He did miss weight, and he still managed to put it all out there. And yes, he lost the decision, so what could have been quite a lucrative fight for him actually turned out to not be such a lucrative fight for him, to be honest. But people are tuning to see Steven Peterson again next time out. And like you said, I think the main talking point is what's next for Sean Strickland, which leads us nicely onto this weekend's card, because he called for a title shot.
Here we go. This is the one we've been waiting for, and this feels like a main event coming in. We're excited for this one. Israel Adesanya will defend his title against the former champion in their second fight against Robert Whittaker. This is a good one. They fought in the Marvel Stadium in Australia. Robert said he felt a lot of pressure, and he kind of fought, as we've talked about in the past, a little bit weirdly, honestly, kind of poorly, if anything. But now we get the rematch. and it's in the middle of nowhere, Houston, Texas. Never heard of it in my life. This is great. What this is going to be the best fight. I'm so excited for this matchup. What do you see in this matchup? What is your breakdown? What do you think?
Yeah, I see a completely different Robert Whittaker to the one we saw 27 months ago, or however long ago it was when he first fought Israel Adesanya. At the end of the day, Whittaker fought like we've never seen Whittaker fight before. He was rushed. He was forcing the fight. He'd just gone 10 rounds with Yoel Romero and didn't force the fight against Yoel Romero. And I think the worst thing to happen to Robert Whittaker was Calvin Gastelum fighting Israel Adesanya and having so much success, because Gastelum went on the front foot against Adesanya and had a lot of success and wobbled Adesanya. And, even though Adesanya's since picked up a loss, that's the worst we've seen Adesanya in a fight, in my opinion. He was exposed against Jan Blachowicz. He was a smaller man, and two well-rounded fighters that are of similar ability. Israel's better on the feet. Jan was better on the floor. Jan managed to get it to the floor, use his superior size as a bigger guy, and obviously pick up the victory. But against Calvin Gastelum, Israel was the bigger man. Israel was the more polished striker. He had the better takedown defense when Calvin tried to get it there. And yet Calvin still had a lot of success by going on the front foot. Yep. So I think that played a detriment to Robert Whittaker, because, Whittaker was seeing, Calvin Gastelum, no one's had success against Israel Adesanya until Calvin Gastelum. So the way to beat Israel Adesanya is to put it on him. Very much like we said last week with Uriah Hall, you stay on his chest and you jab his face off. Calvin Gastelum did that against Israel Adesanya, but looked to land big and looked to land often. I think that was probably Robert Whittaker's game plan. And obviously, as we saw, that played right into the hands of Israel Adesanya, who's one of the best counter strikers in the game. And really, if the rounds were 6 minutes or 5.5 minutes, it would probably finish in the first round after the big knockdown at the end of the first round. But Whittaker managed to obviously just about get back to his stool. And we saw the second, and we saw it finished in the second. Now, the worrying thing is for Whittaker is that does he follow his own game plan, or does he follow what other people have done before and have success against Adesanya again? So does he follow the Calvin Gastelum, where he goes out and tries to sort of knock Adesanya's head off, or does he follow Jan Blachowicz's wrestling heavy approach, see how it is on the feet, and then look to take him down? I think a hybrid of both would work probably best. Lay on him for the first few minutes, see how it is, and then implement a wrestling game. But we know from what Robert Whittaker said to Errol Hawani a few weeks ago that the way to beat Adesanya is wrestling, patience, and striking. Now we can see Robert Whittaker implement all of those things. He's Commonwealth Games team for Australia in wrestling. Striking is phenomenal. Not as good as Adesanya, but it's completely different to Adesanya, And patience, we saw, I've got a piece coming out on the site, a video analysis of Robert Whittaker's keys to victory.
Yes!
Like my Cyril Gann's keys to victory, sort of focusing on Gann's defensive work.
Awesome.
Focusing on the three things that Whittaker himself sort of almost implemented his game plan: wrestling, patience, and his striking. We know Whittaker likes a 1-2 high kick. How can he implement that? We know from the Calvin Gastelum fight, he scored more takedowns in his last fight than he has in any other fight. Yeah. But the majority of those takedowns came from the body lock. Now, how easy will it be to get Adesanya in the body lock? If we look at the Jan Blachowicz fight, it's easy to get him into the body lock, but it's not easy to get him to the floor from that body lock position. So it's going to be an interesting sort of clash. And in the article, I kind of explain how each man can implement their game, how Robert Whittaker can implement his game against Israel Adesanya, and sort of alternatives and plan Bs and plan Cs as to whether, he goes for body lock takedown, it doesn't work, get him up to the fence, but be patient. And, it's all of these things. It's mixed martial arts, but he's having to mix these patience, wrestling, and striking into his game plan to get the victory on Saturday night. And I think, I know you haven't asked for my prediction yet, but I think Whittaker probably does get it done by unanimous decision. I don't think he finishes Adesanya, but I do think we'll hit Anu and get the rubber match.
Yeah, I totally co-sign with you. I think Robert Whittaker has more tools if he's 100% thinking clearly. Yeah. So I think even in the first fight, I thought maybe he has more tools, but he was doing the same rushing forward combination. It was the same combo over and over again. And he did other things that were tactically not intelligent, such as he was able to back up Israel Adesanya against the fence, which not a lot of people can do. And he was doing it repeatedly, and then he would back off. But if he can pressure on that, if he can keep up that fence work, keep Israel's back to the fence, mix in striking to takedowns, taking takedowns into striking, I think he can have a huge amount of success. I also think there's tons of tools that we've seen in past fights that he didn't use against Israel, such as that constant low line side kick that he was using against Yoel Romero. If you want to slow down a kicker, if you want to slow down someone who's constantly on their front foot, kick their knee and chop it in half. And that's what he did against Yoel a bunch of times and changed Yoel's knee permanently. And use that against Israel. Mix in takedowns as you're doing it as well. There's a lot of tools here. But what we've seen more than anything from Robert Whittaker is he's clearly working on game plans. In the last few fights, he, like you talked about, he got more takedowns against Kelvin Gastelum than he has in any other fight. Even against Darren Till, he was mixing in takedowns, making sure that he was able to strike, do takedowns. You know, he was mixing game plans. You can see him working on it in the cage. And he was also showing a lot of patience in both of those fights. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here for Robert Whittaker. If he's 100%, I entirely co-sign with you for a ton of reasons that I think Robert Whittaker gets it done this weekend. Now, what day is your article out?
It'll be out probably tomorrow or Wednesday. So yeah, but I'll finish off editing it after we film this, and then it'll probably be out tomorrow.
Gotcha. So takedowns, I'm going to throw in the low line sidekick. What are some of the other keys? Give us a hint here. I know you'll have some video breakdowns as well.
Yeah, so obviously we've got the 1-2 high kick. Robert Whittaker that we've seen him pretty much knock out Jacare with, although that finished ground and pound, he put Jacare out on his feet. In the first round, he landed it against Calvin Gastelum. And the patience element is what really interested me. You know, he's if he can't find out or figure out, or his team can't figure out what he did wrong in that first fight, the second fight is going to go the exact same way as the first fight.
Yes.
But because he now realizes that he has to be more patient with the way he fights Adesanya, he fought Adesanya his next fight with Darren Till. In the first round against Adesanya, he threw over 60 strikes. And in the first round against Darren Till, he threw a little over, I think, 32 strikes and didn't even land all of those. So he's literally half the amount of strikes he's throwing in the first round. And that's him probably just gauging the distance between him and Till, you know. And that's what he needs to do against Israel Adesanya, is gauge the distance, gauge what Adesanya's, you know, counters are, because we know Adesanya's a counter fighter. Adesanya rarely leads the dance, as it were. But Adesanya's counter to a jab is going to be right at the forefront of his mind. So Robert Whittaker needs to throw that jab out and see what Adesanya does, and then he needs to throw the jab out again and see if Adesanya does the same thing, or if he uses his second counter. And all of these things are going to be at the forefront of Adesanya's mind. And it's going to be I think you will see the first round as a very big chess match between the two. Each man throwing a jab, throwing a leg kick, and seeing what the others counter. You know, if Adesanya throws a leg kick and Robert Whittaker instantly dives for the takedown, Adesanya knows then that he can dummy the leg kick and throw the knee up the middle and look to land on Whittaker. You know, these are things that both men are going to be accustomed to, testing out what their opponent's counter is that's at the forefront of their mind, because it's hard to get out of that rhythm, you know.
Yeah.
If you're used to countering a jab with a hook over the top, and you know Adesanya throws out 3 or 4 jabs, and every time Whittaker's coming with the hook over the top, it's difficult for Whittaker to adapt on the fly. Okay, next time he throws a jab, I'm going to try and slip it and rip to the body. You know, these aren't things that. These are things that they can certainly implement, but then you start to think about, and that's when you start to become a little bit gun shy and think, okay, is he going to throw the jab because I've countered with the same shot 4 or 5 times now?
Yeah.
Oh, he's throwing the jab. I've now got to go for something different, to which Adesanya's already picked up on the likelihood. You know, Adesanya is top 3 strikers in the UFC.
Easily.
He's going to know. He's going to be able to pick up on what Robert Whittaker's counters are. He's going to be able to you know, consider those reads. Now, I think where Adesanya falls down is Whittaker's preference for the body lock takedown, because we've seen Adesanya multiple times do it against Anderson Silva, and we even saw it against Robert Whittaker. It's that he very rarely parries or blocks shots. He's constantly leaning out of the way. phenomenal skill to be able to measure that distance where he just gets out of the way enough so that his opponent can't land on him and then he can come back in. But if he's leaning, that means that all of his weight is backwards. All of his weight is on his feet and he's leaning backwards, exposing his hips, exposing his body, leading to a fairly easy takedown potentially for Robert Whittaker if he chooses to, not fully commit to a shot or throw like a lazy jab out that we've seen before, a lazy jab 1-2. Adesanya may be anticipating the high kick because we know that Robert Whittaker loves the 1-2 high kick. If he throws a 1-2 and then tries to get the body lock takedown, it could be a long night for Adesanya. But with that being said, Adesanya's only really been dominated on the ground by Jan Blachowicz, who is a lot bigger than him. Adesanya will probably be slightly bigger, if not about the same size as Robert Whittaker. So you can't expect that the size difference is going to be too much of a factor. And no, we can't expect any takedowns from Israel Adesanya. But with that being said, we didn't expect any takedowns from Francis Ngannou a few weeks ago. So we're saying all this.
Here we are.
Exactly. I've done my analysis, my video analysis, and I can guarantee, look, Adesanya was never shot for a takedown in the UFC, and I guarantee you he lands 6 or 7 takedowns in this fight and completely blows my analysis out the window. It's the Francis Ngannou factor again. And to be honest, I can't be bothered. Derrick Lewis and Tai Tuivasa in the co-main event is going to be a high-level jiu-jitsu match. I just can't.
Get out of here.
You cannot predict MMA anymore after Francis Ngannou threw it all up in the first pay-per-view of the year, coming out as a wrestler.
D1 Ngannou just like whatever. Who knows?
Exactly.
No experts don't know anything about this sport.
Exactly.
But no, you're okay. So a couple of things you said. You're absolutely right. Let me back up a little bit, and then we'll get to D1 Ngannou. So you're absolutely right with the lean back. So he's really, Israel Adesanya is really good at defensive in layers. So he does one thing first, and then if that doesn't work, he's doing the second thing next, and then if that doesn't work, he's doing the third thing. And he kind of goes really well. It's like an order of operations that he can do in every single exchange. And you can see a lot of guys, like when he was fighting Paulo Costa, he never got past the first layer. Paulo had nothing the entire time. Marvin Vettori similarly really didn't have anything at all, could never get past the first layer. Whereas Robert Whittaker and Kelvin Gastelum could get through the first layer, but whether or not they had success after that point. And this is what striking in layers looks like, striking and defensive in layers. So if Robert Whittaker, we know he can pierce through the first layer. And then if he is able to strike from there, which is not the success that he had in the first fight, but if he's able to get through that first layer, takedowns, doubling up on the jabs, mixing in kicks, there's so many tools. I think this is a good fight for Robert Whittaker, honestly. And I think you hit the nail on the head with that lean back. If you're doubling up on the jab like Chris Weidman was doing, it's a dangerous proposition. It is a dangerous thing because you could lean into it essentially. But so there's a lot of good tools here for Mr. Whittaker. But let's talk about the future ADCC champions in Derrick Lewis. The thing is with MMA, and this is really what the problem with predicting MMA is. It's really a hard sport to predict. There's a lot of tools that one can use. We were talking about like we've never seen Ngannou wrestle in his life. This guy started MMA at like 26. There's no way he's wrestling. No, we were wrong. We were absolutely wrong. But yeah, now we have Tai Tuivasa versus Derrick Lewis. If we break it down, that will probably be longer than this fight.
Exactly. Yeah, I think, each guy they're not coming to try and, like we say, with Adesanya and Whittaker, it's going to be a chess match and they're going to throw a jab to see what the other's counter is. These guys are just going to hopefully meet in the middle and go for 5 minutes.
If that much.
if that much, just looking at the stats now, Tai Tuivasa's average takedowns in the UFC, 0.00%, never shot for a takedown in the UFC.
Yep.
Derrick Lewis, 0.48% with a 25% takedown accuracy. Yep. These guys they're not shooting for takedowns. Tai Tuivasa is the more active man with a 4.63 strikes landed per minute against, just over 2.5 for Derrick Lewis. But neither man's defense is too good. 41% for Derrick Lewis, 49% for Tai Tuivasa.
I can't believe it's that high. I thought Tai got this all the time.
Exactly. What this is saying is that these two guys, the average fight time, both of them is under 10 minutes.
Yeah.
These two guys will happily take one to land one. And I think unfortunately for Tai Tuivasa, I think Derrick Lewis's experience is just going to be too much. First of all, Derrick Lewis is active now. He fought on the last card of 2021, and now he's fighting on the second pay-per-view of 2022. And Derrick Lewis is good. When he's motivated, when he's switched on, he's good. And he's in his home state of Texas, Houston, Texas. I don't think Tai Tuivasa, he was wobbled by Greg Hardy, and Greg Hardy just saw red, and just, his inexperience was screaming when he just ran into Tai Tuivasa.
Yeah.
Augusto Sakai, yes, he's a little bit more experienced than Tuivasa, but he's high level experience, again, speaks volumes. Derrick Lewis, as far as, fighters fought is concerned, he's been in there with, you just go all the way back to, his early UFC days. Sean Jordan, he's picked up a victory against, picked up a loss against, but then Gabriel Gonzaga, Roy Nelson, Travis Brown, Mark Hunt, and then he's gone, Marcin Tybura. Remember, he went the distance. Yes, it was a dreadful fight, but with Francis Ngannou. For sure. The learning experience of Alexander Volkov of, yes, he can rely on his power, but he doesn't want to get too far behind in a fight. Then headlined at MSG against Daniel Cormier. Then he fought Junior Dos Santos.
In a fight he should have been able to win. Losing to JDS in 2019 was a weird thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. And then, you've got the Cyril Gane, and then and the Curtis, he beat Curtis Blades and lost to Cyril Gane. And then he, last time out, under a round against Chris Daukaus, who's the sort of up-and-comer in the division. Mm-hmm. If Lewis loses this, I'm not really sure what's next. If Tai Tuivasa wins this, he's pushing towards that title contention. He's number 11 now, and I think Derrick Lewis is number 3. Tai Tuivasa would have to overtake Derrick Lewis, because that's just how it works. It's in the pound-for-pound rankings. It's the heavyweight ranking. So Tai Tuivasa could jump into the top 5 with a victory over Derrick Lewis, which is crazy to think of after a guy that went 0-3 within, I think, about 10 or 15 months in Tai Tuivasa. But no, both guys, they're both fun personalities. They'll both look to entertain the crowd. They'll both look to bring it. And I think, the patience of Derrick Lewis, I expect Tai Tuivasa to slam the leg kick in, because Derrick Lewis is quite a patient fighter before he gets his opponent hurt, and then when he gets his opponent hurt, you're looking at almost game over then. But you don't want to be landed on by Derrick Lewis. Derrick Lewis has that sort of plodding forward style of, we'll see 2 completely opposite styles. Derrick Lewis will plod forward, hands fairly high for the kind of striker that Derrick Lewis is, against, Robert Whittaker in the main event, who will be on his toes for 25 minutes, in and out movement, constantly throwing and coming out, and quite literally being on his toes for the entire time. And, it's a fun fight. It probably serves the co-main event nicely. It does. Does it have title implications? Not really, but
not seriously, not in any meaningful way.
I mean, with that being said, Derrick Lewis, he holds a win over Francis Ngannou.
Yeah, technically, yeah.
It's one that we all would rather forget about, but it's a win's a win in a way, And it's a good co-main event, because Derrick Lewis in his hometown, Tai Tuivasa is a fan favorite regardless of where he fights. Yes. And it's like I say, it's a good co-main event. You don't want to see, with the greatest respect to Kyler Phillips and Marcelo Rojo, it's on the main card. That's all I can really say about it. There's certainly a fight that I'm sure we'll mention in a second that should be on the main card that isn't. But, I think it serves, like I say, I think Derrick Lewis versus Tai Tuivasa serves a really good co-main event to really get the crowd pumped, ready for the main event, which is sure to be a banger.
The undercard on this might be better than the Sean Strickland thing from last week. So yeah,
without a doubt.
Oh man, there's some bangers on here. So yeah, Tai Tuivasa, he's probably going to outstrike him and then get knocked out because he's just a bit too hittable, honestly. And I think Derrick Lewis just has a better chin. He's never really been knocked out stiff. He just gets TKO'd because he gets beat up a lot, and I'm not sure if Ty's that good. But really, Jared Cannonier versus Derek Brunson. This is the next in line right here. This is a great fight, isn't it? I actually don't even entirely know what to think of we got blonde Brunson versus middleweight Jared Cannonier. Amazing. This is a great fight right here. What do you think?
I still don't really know what Jared Cannonier's fighting style is, but whatever it is, it works. Obviously he got dominated by Robert Whittaker, but so is everybody in the division at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I think his last fight was he went 5 rounds with Calvin Gastelum. Gastelum's a lot more experienced than Derek Brunson at a high level. Yep. At middleweight, Cannonier is 3-1, but those 3 have come. Anderson Silva. 4-1. He beat. 4-1. David Branch, Anderson Silva passed. Not Anderson Silva involved, but we'll put that to the side.
It's a man named Anderson Silva.
Yeah, exactly. Artist formerly known as.
Yeah.
But then he's finished Jack Hermansson. He got dominated by Whittaker where he broke his arm and he popped the eye socket in a 3-round fight and everything. And then he bounces back well against Calvin Gastelum. Now, like I say, I don't really know his style, but whatever it is, it seems to work. And he's a very, very good, entertaining fighter. I think Derek Brunson's unlucky not to get a title shot at the end of the day. He's 5-0 in the division now, and it's not like he's, Sean Strickland's, I think, 6-0 at the moment in his last 6, but different level of competition. Derek Brunson fought Elias Theodorou, who is a awkward, horrible fighter to fight because he doesn't. To me, he's never ever seemed like he actually wants to be in the fight. Elias Theodorou is constantly sort of pop shotting and running away, and Derek Brunson managed to unanimous decision victory against him. Ian Heinisch, who can be a tough competitor, unanimous decision against him.
Yep.
Became the first person to beat Edmund Shabazian, where, let's be honest, Derek Brunson was he was a lamb for the slaughter almost against Edmund Shabazian. Edmund Shabazian was the next guy in the division.
He was.
And Brunson, dominated him. Kevin Holland, all the hype, completely snatched that hype away from him. And then Darren Till, last time out, became the first man to choke down. Not the first man to choke down Till out, but finished Darren Till.
Yep.
And Darren Till's a good fighter. Let's call it a spade a spade. He is a good fighter. Yes, he's out of form at the moment. You think he's 0-2 in his last 2.
Yeah.
But he's a good fighter, and Brunson, dominated him through the 3 rounds, and then obviously finished it in the 3rd. But he dominated him the first 2 rounds, and then was on his way to dominating him in the 3rd before he managed to finish it. I think this is the kind of fight, unfortunately for Brunson, that he loses, because he's always been that nearly guy in the division. He's gone on big wins. He went on the run after he lost to Yoel Romero, beat Lorenz Larkin, Ed Herman, one of the many people to beat Sam Alvey, Rowan Carneiro, Uriah Hall, he finished him. Then he lost to Robert Whittaker. Then he lost to the Anderson Silva fight. And then he went on 2 wins where he knocked out Dan Kelly, knocked out Lyoto Machia in the main event against Jacare, lost. And it seems like, he's on too good a win streak at the moment, and then he might lose again, and that might be the final run for Derek Brunson. But like you say, it's a phenomenal fight. I think this is I would have preferred this one to headline this past weekend's card.
Yep.
I'd like to see this over 5 rounds, but obviously we know it's a 3-round fight. But it serves as a backup for the main event, and probably produces the next contender for the main event. If it's difficult to say that, because Derek Brunson has lost to both Whittaker and Adesanya. Cannonier was dominated by Whittaker just 2 fights ago. Adesanya versus Cannonier is a new fight. So I think if Cannonier and Adesanya win, that's the next fight to make. And I think if Derek Brunson, to be honest, I think whoever wins this fight, does get the next shot. Derek Brunson, you can't really go on a 7-fight winning streak, and you've got the history with both men. He's lost to both men by finish.
That's true.
So you can't really go on a 7-fight winning streak and not get a title shot. I mean, Leon Edwards being the exception, but seemingly he'll get a title shot in the summer. But it's, you can't, especially in a division as thin as middleweight at the moment, where everyone's kind of already lost to the champion or the number 1 contender. So he's due a title fight.
The top 5's just standing around. They've all already lost. But I agree with you. I think it's a great fight. It's a fun one. Who gets their hand raised at the end of this? Because we got 2. It's a clash of styles. You got the wrestler who's somehow gotten better at wrestling in the last couple of years versus a striker who has also gotten better at striking in the last couple of years. What do you see going down in this one?
it's a really, this one, as far as the main card is concerned, is the toughest for me to pick. I'm probably going to go Brunson.
Yep.
Based purely on form. You know, he's 6-0 and he's carrying so much confidence going into this bout. But can he get Cannonier down? You know, Cannonier is going to be the bigger man because Cannonier is a former heavyweight, is a former light heavyweight. You know, he's got a 62% takedown defense. He's the better striker, Cannonier. Yep. I don't know. I said I picked Brunson, and I've pretty much just picked up Cannonier. But this is what I'm trying to say. Is it's such a closely fought. But I think there's definitely not going to be a finish in this fight. I can't see a finish from either man in this fight. I think it goes to full 15, and I think Brunson probably gets his hand raised and calls out the winner of the main event, which is, you know, deserving.
Which is very deserving. And I'm glad you said that because I'm going to pick the opposite. And the reason is I like Jared Cannonier in this matchup because I think Brunson he is getting good takedowns in his last few fights, but his flaws were always that he was so hittable when he was standing still and when he was going for takedowns. The transitionary moments of him striking into takedowns, he's always been hittable. Darren Till lost the fight and was still able to crack him a couple of times in that fight. Kevin Holland lost that fight pretty handedly and still cracked him a couple of times on the way in.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
If you're getting cracked by
that Cannonier is a much heavier striker than these two guys as well.
Yeah, that's why I'm gonna lean Jared Cannonier, but I think Derek Brunson fighting either of those guys in the title is more interesting than Jared Cannonier. I think he has more tools to beat the guys in the title, whereas I think Jared Cannonier handedly loses to either of these guys, but I'm going to pick Jared this weekend. So I think that's a fun one. Let's go down the card, unless you want to throw anything else on that.
No, like you say, just go down the card because it's stacked, you know.
It is. Why are they trying to get Kyler Phillips an easy win? Do Kyler Phillips owe the UFC a favor and they're just trying to get him an easy win? What is this?
You know, I think Phillips last time out against Piver, who obviously just lost to Sean O'Malley, was on a big winning run. Phillips, you know, he's on 4-fight winning run, 3 in the UFC.
And that doesn't even tell how good of a story of like, this guy's quite good. He's a 4-fight win streak, but he's better than his record.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that victory against Song Yadong is a quality victory, you know.
Yeah.
And he was the underdog in that fight, and he pulled off a fairly convincing victory. Against Piver, difficult fight.
Yep.
Did lose the fight, obviously. And now, you know, he's facing Marcelo Rojo, who's 0-1 in the UFC. Hasn't fought since, you know, March of last year, and has had, but in his defense, he's had 3 fights cancelled against 3 different guys, and it's never been him that's pulled out. He's been ready to fight on each of those occasions.
That's frustrating.
And his opponent's pulled out for sure. Yeah, you know, his opponent's pulled out in August, September, and October. So now, you know, I think Kyler Phillips wins this one fairly convincingly, maybe even by a finish. You know, every one of Rojo's recent losses have come via finish. You know, Americana, rear naked choke, guillotine, arm triangle, and then obviously Charles Jourdain finished him with punches at the end of their fight. So I think Kyler Phillips gets it done. I think he then puts himself back in the sort of question of top 15 at bantamweight after that disappointing loss to Piver.
Cosign. Yeah, that's a great fight for Phillips. Bobby Green, Haspat Nasrat. That's a great fight right there. I don't know what you see in it. What do you think of those two boys?
I mean, Bobby Green, you know, coming off the big win against Al Quinta, the finish that he was so desperately in need of. Bobby Green is a decision machine. You know, he hasn't been. Yeah. He's been the distance in every fight since 2016, trading wins and losses. And, you know, that fight that he didn't go the distance in, he got knocked out by Dustin Poirier, which is not really a lot of shame in that, to be honest.
No.
That's lightweight Dustin Poirier as well. You know, went the distance with Rafael Fiziev, went the distance with Thiago Moises, and then knocked out Iaquinta in the first round at the end of last year. You know,
pretty good.
Exactly. And, you know, Nasrat Haqparast, we had the story of him fighting Dan Hooker in his last fight with, you know, I think it was his mother that passed away, and, you know, he still managed to make weight and come over and make the fight. And, you know, yes, he was largely outclassed against Dan Hooker, but yeah, you know, I think Bobby Green and Nasrat Haqparast are about on the same level. You know, these guys are fringe top 15 guys that will likely never fight for a title. but always come and have got exciting styles, and who knows, Nasrat Haqparast could serve as a backup to the main event because he looks so much like Calvin Gastelum. They might just put him in there just in case.
He does look a lot like yeah, it's tough to predict because Bobby Green is also kind of inconsistent and like he can make everybody miss. He doesn't always punish people when they miss.
No, exactly.
He's inconsistent at the best of times, and he's had an up and down career. Nasrat, very talented fighter. I don't think we entirely know his potential at this point, but I think this fight we're going to find out where he sits in the division and what his potential is. Sure. Do you have a prediction on this one, or like it's too up in the air?
I'd probably go for Bobby Green, taking that momentum from the Al Quinta fight to probably get it done by decision. I don't think he finishes Nasrat. If Dan Hooker can't finish Nasrat Haqparast, Bobby Green can't.
No, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, good point there.
Bobby Green is I think he's got the ability to finish these big guys, but he's got that Philly shell style where he's constantly shoulder rolling, but he never actually breaks out of that Philly shell to land a shot, which he needs to do, but it is what it is. I think he probably, he gets a decision fairly easily if he can get on his bike and punish Nasrat with the jab.
Yeah, I co-sign with you. That's the thing of if we're saying like if he can fight at his best, but sometimes he doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. He's a frustrating fighter if you're a Bobby Green fan because, like you say, I think he's got a lot of potential still. And potential at his age of the tender age of 35, but he's been fighting in the UFC forever. He's been fighting in the UFC. When was his debut? Back in 2013. Sorry, it was his UFC debut.
Yeah,
and before that he was in Strikeforce.
Yep.
And he's still evolving. He's still getting these finishes, and I think he's still got a potential. But even after he's got a record of 28, 12-1, and yet I still don't think we've seen the best of Bobby Green even at 35. So I think this may be a bit of a coming out party. Second pay-per-view back to back on the main card again, opening up the main card. So they obviously the UFC have some faith in him.
I think you're probably that's how he's frustrating, so we think he has potential. Maybe that's just as good as I don't know. Maybe that's just it. Let's get to the men's main event. You know what I'm saying? For the boys out there, the real main event. Andrei Arlovsky versus I'm just kidding. Obviously, we have a great fight in Alexander Hernandez versus Renato Moicano. This is a must-win fight for both men. Alexander Hernandez came in with a ton of potential, whereas Renato Moicano had to take all the hype for himself and had to win fights where he wasn't favored. And the UFC didn't even want him to win. Alexander Hernandez is nothing but favorable matchmaking because the UFC seems to like this guy, but now both of them are must win. I don't entirely know what to expect from this matchup because both guys are a little bit inconsistent at times.
Unpredictable, I think. Renato Moicano, I still see him as quite almost new in the UFC, despite the fact that he's been in the UFC since 2014. He was dominating Brian Ortega, lost that guillotine choke in the final round.
Yep.
He dominated Calvin Kattar with low leg kicks, lost to Jose Aldo, lost to Korean Zombie, and then he had that strange win in his lightweight debut against Hazdazovich, where he subbed him in 30 seconds or 40, like under a minute. He subbed him, and he was pissed off then because he wanted to have more of a lightweight debut and he wasn't allowed to. And then he came up against Rafael Fiziev, who savagely knocked him out.
Yeah.
And then he went up against Jai Herbert, who, how you said for Alexander Hernandez, they're giving Hernandez sort of favorable fights. They're doing the exact opposite with Jai Herbert.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah.
Like the Black Country Banger, they just giving him killer after killer, and it showed when they thought he finished Jai Herbert. Alexander Hernandez, like you say, burst onto the scene with that knockout over Beneil Dariush.
That was really good. That was like a decade and a half ago at this point. That feels like forever. It was 2018. I thought that was so long ago.
Yeah, and then he was exposed against Donald Cerrone as he disrespected Cerrone. He didn't really take him seriously, and Cerrone made him pay quite badly for it. And then he lost to Drew Dober, and then he lost to Thiago Moises. He picked up the the victory against Mike Breeden last time out, but that was supposed to be a fight against Leonardo Santos. Breeden taking it on short notice.
Yeah.
With the greatest respect to Breeden, he had no business being in there with Alexander Hernandez, and like you say, it's different. Alexander Hernandez, I'm expecting just to look at his age and see that he's 24, 20, he's 29 now.
He's not an up and comer.
No, for sure. And he needs to win this fight to stay relevant at 155, because trading wins and losses, but one of those wins being against the guy who took the fight on very short notice, who wasn't in the UFC 2 weeks before he was planned to fight, doesn't scream that he's going to be a top contender for years to come. And at 29, has he reached his ceiling already? He's good at wrestling, but he's so easily hit that it kind of nullifies that wrestling, because even when he's in the clinch, he's easy to land on. Renato Moicano, I think, is a much more well-rounded fighter, and Alexander Hernandez needs to be careful about taking Renato Moicano down to the ground, because he's very good at jiu-jitsu. But where does this fight play out? I think it plays out probably, if Hernandez has his way, it plays out in the clinch. If Moicano has his way, it plays out slightly more at range. And I think Moicano does quite well and probably gets his hand raised.
Should. By all means, Renato Moicano has had better wins and better losses, but I think he's a little bit hittable at times, and he's a little bit knockoutable at times. I don't know. Maybe he's getting knocked out by like Chad Sung Jung and Jose Aldo. I shouldn't be talking like he's a guy that gets knocked out in every fight. He's a great fighter. But yeah, I don't know. This is probably a win for Moicano. Maybe you're right. You talked me into it. I think you're right about that. What else do you see on the card that you want to talk about? I mean, Casey O'Neill, she's going to win that fight. That's the only thing. That's the fight that I'm most looking forward to on the prelims. Although we've got the Hernandez Moicano fight. Yeah. Casey O'Neill is, I've lost count of the amount of times I've said it on this podcast. She's the future of the flyweight division. She will be fighting for a title sooner rather than later. With that being said, she hasn't fought anyone with any great experience. The most experienced fighter I think she's fought is Antonina Shevchenko, 9-3. So she's got, 12 overall fights. Sure.
And then you go up against Roxy, who's 25-19.
Yeah.
And has been fighting since, her debut is in 2003.
Like Roxy was fighting like way before Ronda, way before Gina Carano. Like Roxy's been in the game.
She was 4-0 4-1, 5-1. She fought twice in the same night. By the time that she made her debut when Casey O'Neill was 6 years old.
Yeah.
And
she's been around.
And she's taken she's had 5 losses in a row, and she's bounced back. She was on the Ultimate Fighter and she bounced back. I think she's on the Ultimate Fighter twice and she bounced back. She's picked up devastating losses and she's picked up big wins.
Yeah.
She holds a win over Andrea Lee, who's looking like a killer at the moment. She holds a win over Macy Barber, who she completely stole the hype of Barber. She holds a win over Antonina Shevchenko when Shevchenko was undefeated. She's certainly dangerous, but I think Casey O'Neill's too good for her.
Yeah,
and we said this against Macy Barber, but I think it's a difficult fight to call, because you look at Roxy's 3 most recent wins. She took the O of Antonina Shevchenko, she took the O of Macy Barber, and she handed Andrea Lee Andrea Lee, that was the disappointing loss for Andrea Lee. That was a big step back. And that was Andrea Lee coming off 2 losses prior to that. But then she looked like a killer since then. I think Casey O'Neill really has to mind her P's and Q's against Roxy, because if she doesn't, we've seen Roxy come again, and we've seen Roxy come again, and we've seen Roxy come again, and we've seen her use her experience. She's got over 40 fights. Casey O'Neill's 8-0. She got over 40 fights, and she can use that experience, Roxy. At the end of the day, Macy Barber took her, took Antonina Shevchenko's, defeated Andrea Lee. That's just her 3 most recent fights. And Casey O'Neill needs to fight sensibly and not try to force the finish, because she's 3-0 in the UFC now with 3 finishes. She can't force a finish. With that being said, I think she gets it done by decision. I can't see I wouldn't be surprised to see a finish, but Roxy's maybe a little bit too wily to get herself into that position.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you on that. It's hard for me to find the timeline in which Roxy is dangerous in a lot of positions. If she can get control and secure top position, she's quite good. She has a ton of experience, like you talked about, but this is a win. This is a setup win for Casey O'Neill. The UFC is pushing her over the top with this win. This is going to be her capital win, the win that they talk about in the future. This is a Casey O'Neill highlight reel we're about to see, and it's a good matchup for her. I'm excited for that one.
I want to see Roxy put Casey on her back and see what Casey's like off her back. I want to see Roxy push Casey O'Neill up to the fence and get her in the clinch and get her in the defensive clinch position. I want to see Roxy probably take, the first round or the second round off Casey O'Neill, where Casey knows that she, for sure, yeah, and where Casey knows that she's got to go into the third round, put it all out there to get the win. She's got to fight off her back. She's got to nullify Roxy's attacks. Like you say, Roxy's dangerous when she's on top, and she can stay on top. She might not always do damage, but she can stay on top for the full round and dominate her opponent for the full round and just do enough, with this over 40 fight experience. She can just do enough to keep herself on top and not make the referee stand her up. And, she can spend 4.5 minutes lying on top of you. And I almost want to see that, because this is a good fight for Casey O'Neill to test herself against one of the most experienced woman on the roster and get herself into these bad positions where realistically she has to bounce back and finish this fight, or she has to bounce back and make sure that she's really fighting in the third round, because she hasn't really had to. We've seen her get 3 finishes. We haven't seen her we saw her in the third round again in a second fight, but she was 2-0 up in that fight, so she could have, if she wanted to, coast in that third round. We've seen her go to a 5-round decision before entering the UFC.
Yep.
But we want to see her in difficult positions, so that when she does progress on to fight the upper echelons of the division, it's okay. No need to worry. We've seen Casey O'Neill on her back against Roxy, or we've seen Casey O'Neill 2-0 down and get the guillotine choke finish against Roxy. This is what I want to see from Casey O'Neill. So I want to see her probably lose the first round, so that she has to bounce back, so that we see her character. And fair play to her. Like we said, what can you do if a guy has looked like Shavkat? If a guy has looked so good that he hasn't really been tested, but you want to see Casey O'Neill, because she's in the top 15 now. She's fighting Roxy, who's an established top 15er. She's going to be pushing on to the upper echelons of the division. We want to see her. We want to see her in these tough positions to see how she does cope. And I'm sure with her experience, I think she fights out of Extreme Couture.
Mm-hmm.
I have no doubt that she will take that experience, and the team around her will be experienced to deal with that. They've been in that position how many times, and I think Casey will deal with it quite well.
I agree with you. It's a great breakdown, and I'm looking forward to the future of Casey O'Neill. This is a good win for her. But yeah, like you said, hopefully she gets put through some adversity so we can know how good she really is. Don't dominate your opponent. We want to see you work. What other fights do you see on the card? Those are the main ones that I would want to talk about. Is there any other fights you want to break down on this one, on 271?
Rather than fighters themselves, fighters, we've got Andrei Arlovsky returning, Alex Perez fighting for the first time since he had his title shot loss against Matt Schnell. That should be a good fight.
Yep.
William Knight seems to be fighting all the time. He fought 3 times in 2020, 3 times in 2021. He only fought in November when he beat Alonzo Menefield. He's back. Carlos Ulberg, who had an awful lot of hype and then completely blew it in his UFC debut. He came out, gave absolutely everything in the first round, and then had nothing for the second round. It was finished.
And Kennedy and Njukawani is not that good.
Exactly, yeah. And and that, like I said, he just blew it. He just went out and it just used up too much energy. It's simple as that. We've got Jacob Malkoun returning, and Douglas Silva de Andrade still going. He's still here. He hasn't actually, for someone that's been in the UFC since 2014, he's only had 9-10 UFC fights. You know, since 2014, that's not really that much. But he fought twice last year, losing to Lerone Murphy, which I'm not surprised about, and then that big knockout back in October. He fights Sergey Morozov, who's, you know, and he's dropped back down to 135 now. Morozov, you know, he's 1-1 in the UFC, lost to Umar Nurmagomedov. Well, yeah, most people do. And then beat Khalid Taha. Yeah, most people do. So how good is he?
Most people do.
You know, we're not quite sure yet how good he is. You know, he's former bantamweight champion of M1 Challenge, and I think it's a tough fight for Douglas Hill for De Andrade, to be honest. But you know, there's talent scattered throughout. You know, we've got Blood Diamond making his debut as well.
Blood Diamond, what a name!
Yeah, man, for sure. And you know, he's only 3-0, and he's had a fight cancellation, so he's now fighting Jeremiah Wells, who is 1-0 in the UFC. I don't know an awful lot about Jeremiah Wells, to be honest, but what I know about Blood Diamond is that there is a lot of hype around him, and understandably so. You know,
I love that. I want him to become a very good fighter just because of that name. I want to say Blood Diamond over and over again.
For sure. And you know, but if Tapology is anything to go for, they're opening up the entire card, and you know, that means that there's fighters from Australasia opening up on the first fight with Blood Diamond, Jacob Marcoon, Carlos Ulberg, and then, you know, you kind of all gearing then towards Tai Tuivasa, and then gearing towards the main event in Robert Whittaker and Israel Adesanya. So it's a very big Australasian sort of feel to this card, and rightfully so. You know, you've got the two guys headlining it, New Zealand and Australia. The fans are going to be out for it, and I think it's going to be an absolute quality card.
Yeah, and Australia, and I know we sometimes talk about big picture stuff, but Australia makes a lot of sense for a UFC. Like they're good, and they do good numbers in Australia. Like they really tried to put over. They had Ronda fighting in a stadium there. They had Israel Adesanya, but their events are like 11 in the morning. So it's a great, like, if you're a UFC fan in Australia, you're made. Where you and I are like, we're yelling at our family too the next day because we're cranky.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you know, this is a stay up fight night.
It is.
Sorry, pay-per-view. It's not like a, you know, I can't lie, I didn't stay up for Sean Strickland. I watched the Chris Eubank Jr. Leon Williams fight that finished about 11:30, and I went to bed. And you know, I preferred to watch the Eubank Jr. fight over the prelims of the UFC because it's just a better fight in my opinion.
It is.
And you know, and it turned out to be, it was a great fight. So you know, looking ahead, I think this time next week we're going to be obviously breaking down UFC 271. We'll look ahead to the UFC fight nights. I think it's Rafael versus Rafael, and it's Fiziev and Dos Anjos.
That's a fun one.
For sure. And I'm looking forward to breaking that down with you next week. And then, you know, we'll review. Obviously, we've got one championship with John Lineker back in action. And we've got Cal Brook versus Amir Khan to preview as well. So it's going to be a busy show next week.
Man, I'm looking forward to it. Folks, my name's Tim Wheaton. Links will be down below. He is Frazer Krohn. Frazer, last word. What do you got going on this week? Where can people find more of you? Yeah,
so like I said, we've got the a video analysis of Robert Whittaker's keys to victory going up on the site tomorrow from myself. We'll share that all over the socials, you know, especially, you know, me and Tim, like I said a couple of weeks ago, we're active on Instagram, on the MMA Sucka Instagram, on my personal Instagram, Frazer Krohn Writing, on Tim's, Tim Wheaton MMA. And, you know, keep an eye out on MMA Sucka. We've got plenty of previews this week. And obviously we have staff picks every week, because I'm already flip-flopping on Jared Cannonier versus Derek Brunson. So yeah, tune into MMA Sucka on Saturday just to see if I've completely gone 180 and picked Israel Adesanya, Tai Tuivasa, and Jared Cannonier. Because to be honest, it's one of those fights where I'm really not sure already. So yeah, it'll be on MMA Sucka on Saturday. So check out if I flake it and go for something slightly different.
They're all D1 wrestlers come Saturday night. All right, thanks, folks.